You can't scale without the right people.
Ogilvy is your client, right? And Ogilvy is one of the best known marketing agencies in South Africa.
The worst sin is leaving money on the table. But in order to maintain your integrity as well as your ability to deliver, you have to know when to say no.
There's the challenge of agencies can be in a position where they're everything to everyone, right? They end up trying to compete on price. How is it that you're really differentiating yourself and competing and winning in this market?
Work out your average billable rate, and then anything that you could hire someone else for more cost effectively, you should. Otherwise, you're basically like losing money.
When did you take the leap to go to an overseas market, and how do you manage that?
So we actually recently acquired another agency to bring in additional resources, but primarily the founder of that agency.
What do you would credit to your own success of going from there to becoming an award-winning agency? Hello and welcome back to the Founder Files. Today I've got the founder, managing director and visionary of one of South Africa's award-winning marketing agencies, WowW Digital. WowW is currently sitting about 40 people on headcount. They have got a presence across South Africa, Europe, the UK, and they have been scaling quite well. And a huge reason why I'm so excited to chat to Felix is because he's built the business to a point, especially as a service-based business model and an agency model, where he's been able to stand out from the competitors in the market. He's in a position now where he's able to say no to clients and doing well in terms of sales. And so obviously I want to figure out how it is that he got there, because that's always a great place to be, and I think what a lot of us as founders aspire to. So obviously the podcast starts with understanding the business, but we get quite deep into the problem that a lot of agencies face as being everything for everyone. And how is it that he has solved that problem for himself? How is it that they've standed out and competed? And what niches they've picked in the market to be able to consistently win deals and achieve a 33% conversion rate on any inquiry that they get onto the website. So that's 1 in 3 inquiries they get on the website, they convert into a paid for engagement, which I think is incredible. And obviously because of that, we get into the depths of a sales process and just some insights around a 2.5-year journey that he's been on, with a sales coach, and obviously optimizing his own sales process to figure out really what works. We then chat about how is it that he's going about scaling the business, implementing traction right now, and the insights that he's getting, and just the journey of doing this with his team, with his business partner, and having a remote business. Obviously, so many more insights in between. Now, if you're not already following the Founder Files, right, and topics like this is something that gets you super excited, and you want to learn like these tactics that other entrepreneurs like you are applying, you want to make sure that you are following, you're subscribed now to make sure that you don't miss any of these incredible episodes with these really practical pieces of wisdom and insights that you can apply immediately into your business. So make sure you like, follow, subscribe. It's the best way to support the podcast. Also the best way to make me feel happy, but also the best way for you to get these practical insights from other founders like you, so you can avoid years of trial and error in scaling your business too. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Felix Norton from WowW Digital. Welcome to the Founder Files, the podcast that's like eavesdropping on a conversation with a successful entrepreneur over a fireside chat. Join me, Cameron Coots, through this unique experience of unfiltered stories and insights from scaling founders around the globe as they share their ups, downs, and everything in between. Felix, welcome to the Founder Files. I was even saying offline now as we were getting ready for this that we've been friends for a while, and obviously it's taken a bit too long to make this happen, so my sincere apologies, but I'm so grateful to have you here on the show. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I've enjoyed listening, and now it's exciting to be part of the show itself.
Yeah, and I mean, look, while being an award-winning agency, you've had many guests that have been on the podcast have been clients of yours as well, right? I mean, the most recent one is obviously Katlego from Yoko. So this is cool. It's a business that's definitely worth sharing the story about, man. And besides that, I think you're a fantastic person with an amazing value system. So I just can't wait to see what it is that I'm going to learn from you and what we're going to be able to share with the audience in today's episode.
Well, I hope I can give something valuable to someone else.
I have no doubt that you are going to add lots of value today. So thank you again for being here. But just to kick it straight off, I mean, I've already laid you up with saying award-winning agency. Just tell us a bit about the business and your business model and how it really works.
Sure. So what we do at the end of the day is we help businesses get online and ultimately succeed. So we're a digital marketing agency And we help businesses start, grow, and thrive online. And we accomplish that through different services, all the way from starting out and defining your brand. So a logo and a great foundational website, then adding the fuel to the engine, or light igniting that fire with some type of marketing, would that be paid ads or SEO, and then ultimately succeeding online by cementing their online presence and kind of squeezing out all the extra digital marketing opportunities, whether that be PR, a newsletter, just all the little things that help maintain your online presence. And that's our journey, is where we kind of start, get the great stuff going, get the engine moving, and then continue to make sure that it's running well.
It will help me understand your market a bit more, because what you highlighted there is that, businesses that, have never really begun the digital marketing journey properly until now. And that could be very different life cycles. Like there could be a manufacturing or product-based business that's now considering digital in 2025, or in like a relatively early stage startup that's still like getting off the ground. Like either way, you can help them. Yet anyone that goes on your website can see that you've got clients like Takealot, Yoko, Vida, Get Smarter, and even Ogilvy, which I've got a huge question mark around and a curiosity about. But yeah, who's your like ideal kind of target that you work for?
Our ideal customer at the moment, the one that we've found to be the most enjoyable and somewhat lucrative to work with, is a business that actually has a good product or service already. So they've sold that aspect of their business. They just haven't done the online marketing component well. So maybe it's their branding that isn't, up to date. They don't have an online sales channel. They have good brand recognition, but they're just not visible online. That's the type of client that we're primed to help succeed, because we're not in the business of solving your day-to-day business challenges. We will refer them to maybe someone like yourself for that type of guidance. But when it comes to making sure that they can be seen and that they can find their customers, that's where we come in and help with that.
Awesome. So talk to me how the business started, right? What's the founding story that made you decide to venture off into the unknown world of entrepreneurship?
It's the classic agency story. I built a website for my dad. One thing led to another, and then suddenly you have an agency. It's a very boring story of, doing something as a side hustle, realizing that one could make some money out of it, maybe hiring a person part-time, and then ultimately you have a team. Whereas what's changed now is that from it being something that kind of just happened on a whim, we're now actually trying to be very strategic about growing the best agency in Africa. That would be kind of like our BHAG.
Okay, so that's the big, hairy, audacious goal that you've got ahead of you. It's hairy and audacious because you want to be the best on the continent, and I love it. I love any ambition that someone has. Not to discredit the own start of your journey, I think many of us don't realize we don't know what we know, right? We don't know what we're sitting on, but what we might not know is that we're sitting on something that can become an award-winning agency in Africa, with the BHAG of becoming the greatest agency on the continent. So talk to me a bit about this journey of really validating and building this momentum to being so successful with such great clients in such a short space of time.
Right. So the journey for an agency is quite hard, because you have a fundamental chicken and egg situation. Agencies have this thing where they want to work with the best in the biz, and in order to acquire those clients, they need to have the proof of success. So you have to
Every
have
service provider's problem.
Sure, but with agencies, it's you're always competing against lots of other agencies, and they have a portfolio. They have clients and a track record that one needs to show off in order to win the project. Sometimes it might come down to other things like price and, positioning. But more often than not, the biggest trust factor is proof of success. So to grow, you have to usually start small. You do whatever you can to put money, in your pocket. And that means working with maybe not the ideal client, maybe working with a client that is underpaying you or that is maybe not the nicest person to work with. But you take that work on and you hustle to ensure that you get that project. And then once you complete that project, and assuming that it's usually, well, you hope that it's going to be a success, you use that as leverage to acquire your next client. And that repeats and you snowball. And so from one client to another, and every now and then you maybe reach a little bit higher out of your kind of capability or what you feel comfortable with, and you take on that bigger, scarier client, which then enables the next client. So it's a game of taking what you can, getting better, using that momentum to then catch the bigger fish, which then catches and attracts the other fish.
Yeah, obviously your portfolio is crucial. I think the difference between the nature of your business and many other professional services businesses is that there's a tangibility to your proof. You can go and see our work. You can so besides actually seeing the logos of the clients that we worked with, you can actually go and look at the work that we've done. I think it's very different when you, in the nature of the line of work that I do, is that in a couple of months you can see their success, but it's like, what does that actually look like? You're not going to see their financials over there. You're not going to see many of these results unless it's actually touted as a case study. And even then, there's the bias of like, Cam, I know you wrote that case study. So bringing this to the whole point of what I'm going on this preamble for is, how is it that you're competing, right? There's the challenge of agencies can be in a position where they're everything to everyone, right? They end up trying to compete on price. And at this point, besides the quality of the clients that you've worked with and on, how is it that you're really differentiating yourself and competing and winning in this market?
So that's a great question, because I think it's something that every agency struggles with, which is how to be unique, how to position oneself as a specialist or a particular problem solver. For us, what we did is we picked a platform, which was WordPress. So we started off and we were like, we're going to be the number one go-to guys for WordPress. And at the time, it was a specialization or focus of mine, which was search engine optimization.
So before you even continue, share what the name of the business actually means.
Yeah. So WOW stands for WordPress 1 Week Websites originally. It doesn't stand for that anymore. We deprecated that because we changed. We started with this idea of like, okay, cool, we're going to churn out these kind of very templated, cost-effective, websites within a week. And we're just going to do volume. Bang out one side after another, and but what we found was that that's not what led to success. It's not what clients wanted. What they wanted was a strategic partner, someone to guide them through a journey and to help them at multiple stages within that journey, which is not something that one can do in just a week. It's something that takes a lot of different holistic components. So it's not just the website, it's not just the branding, it's not just your social media marketing or your product. It's the combination of all of these different components which together ultimately tend towards success. And then there's a bit of luck and everything else interspersed between that all. But yeah.
I did pivot the conversation slightly, as we entrepreneurs tend to do. So thank you. Just want to give some context to the name, but it also gives a bit of substance to the whole topic that we're getting into, is around the fact that your positioning evolves. How you compete evolves, what your value proposition changes too. The services that you bring on, the journey you go on with clients, as your company evolves, and how you now position yourselves, the markets you compete in, the kinds of clients that you're even getting now have different needs. So with this evolution, what I'm curious now is what of these. Talk to me about these moments around how you've competed with other agencies and where that you're consistently going to win a deal, and how you've codified that differentiation?
Right. So the first one was selecting a niche within the industry. So that was WordPress first. So we were like, cool, we're going to do WordPress. And we're also going to dominate the search presence of what people will see. So we want to make sure that we come up whenever you search for what the end client is looking for. So they're looking for WordPress web design or web design. We just want to make sure we're always visible everywhere. And it was that visibility, that constant kind of presence that we almost always would get to put our hat in the ring. And then from there, it would be the pitch, which would ultimately convert or lose to another agency. And through that, we were able to build up a client base, and that snowball effect of one great client leads to another, and that network effect as well. So we have now 50% of our new work is through kind of search, and then the rest is through referrals or repeat work from our clients.
Okay, awesome. That's a epic and interesting combo. I think the fact that you managed to get 50% through search at all is where most people in professional services fundamentally rely on referrals. I think is fantastic, and is just a credit to, like, you took your own medicine, right? And I think that's one of the biggest trust builders, the fact that it's like, if it works for us, it's going to work for you too, because we know how to do this well. And before I so rudely cut you off earlier, you were going to be speaking about exactly SEO services and the part that you went down there. And me knowing you, I think that's a huge pillar around the success that WowW is able to create for its clients.
Yeah. So SEO for us was just kind of, it was a rabbit hole that I went down, because it's kind of an incredibly competitive strategy, and it's also a strategy that feels a bit like the mystic arts. You kind of try a lot of stuff, but you don't have there's no checkbox to say this is correct, and if you do this, you will receive this. It's doing lots of different things and then adapting to what works and trying to find the correlation rather than the exact trademark of what is it working, and then adapting as well. So right now what we're seeing is that something like generative search engines or AI, so if you ChatGPT, Perplexity, Grok, whatever, pick your poison, making sure that if you go to one of these modern search chatbots, which are becoming a new entry point for search, because people will say, oh, hey, ChatGPT, who's the best agency, web design agency in Cape Town? That's a new entry point of search. So by making sure that we come up number one in that list as well, that's another great way of just bringing in and constantly adapting to all these new ways which people find information.
So it sounds what you're boiling down to, and I don't know if this is the edge of your agency, but at the end of the day, it's an edge of yourself as an individual. I think what you become exceptionally good at is search, and how is it that we can stand out at number one amongst all the noise? And just naturally, the skill set of that is just going to help anyone stand out in any noisy environment, especially now when it's noisier than ever.
Yeah, it's a combination of perception and executional capability, right? So you need to have both the ability to execute, but you also need to ensure that you have the perception that you're able to. And often I think a lot of agencies have one and not the other. And that's where you get a lot of great agencies who I think are really good at what they do, but they don't have the traffic and the kind of the demand. Or you get people who are great at generating demand, but are terrible in execution. And then you get those horror stories.
Yeah, 100%. But I think that's what I go and attest to simply, is that in your space, is being able to do it for yourself and do it well, shows a level of consistency, but shows a level of professionalism too, because the number of also agency founders I've encountered, they're busy with clients, but they're so busy to do their own marketing, and their website's out of date and everything. And they know it's important, but they still don't get to it. And I'm like, you're hurting your greatest ability to build trust with new clients. I mean, the referability is there, but this is why a lot of businesses get stuck into this loop of, all their business is coming from referrals is because, they haven't done what they do best for themselves.
Yeah. Every person has a different name for it. The plumber's problem, the cobbler's children,
I say you can't perform brain surgery on yourself.
right. But every business has, I think, an example of that, and we're not innocent either. We have a ton of things that we have yet to implement on ourselves that we want to, and it's I think a huge challenge of any business to practice what they preach and make sure that they're doing what they are capable of doing as well.
On that exact note, that's the biggest irony of Metavolve, is the fact that we've tried to practice what we preach for ourselves, but it's actually slowed us down. And this could be the biggest backfiring thing I've ever said about my own business on a podcast. But the main reason why is that what we do is not made for the life cycle stage that we're in, right? So it's like in the early stage of business where you are still formulating your positioning in the market. Like you're still formulating your edge. You're still building up that traction. Spoiler alert, everyone. That's a topic we're going to get into a little bit later. It really hasn't really applied. So us being overly strategic around how is it that we plan to build the business is something that we've learned. There's different methodologies for different moments, right? In terms of, there's the lean startup for a reason, there's the mom test for the early stage, and then you've got the entire world of management science and business strategy when you're an established business with a scaling business model. I'm going to park that thought because that's going to send me down a rabbit hole, and this is me talking to you. Okay, so Felix, I think one other thing that I want to get onto is I really like this topic of problem of being everything to everyone. And you mentioned the ways that you're competing. I still think a huge edge in that is you doing what you do for others, for yourself, and do it exceptionally well. But you also mentioned niche. What is your niche that you focus on? I mean, you mentioned what your ideal target customer and profile is. But from the outside, it looks like it's entrepreneurial businesses.
So those are one of the kind of the core clients, but our actual niche or specialization, therefore, is WordPress. So being able to deliver a website is possible on so many different platforms. I know you guys recently switched over to Webflow. You have other great platforms that are relevant to different stages, and they're all different solutions that best solve particular problems. And we identified that WordPress just had the largest market share, and we wanted to make sure that we were the specialist within that. And then we became client market agnostic. So anybody they can be in any industry. We've had, I think, everything from a witch all the way to a funeral home to, mega corporates. We're completely agnostic as long as they want to build it on WordPress. And that's where we don't cross the line. We have the luxury of saying no these days because we have enough demand.
Congratulations, by the way. It's a very hard place to get to, especially in a service-based business.
It's amazing. It's so
I'm sure it is
rewarding to say no. When it's not the right fit, because you can immediately disqualify a bad project. But also when we don't have to fight anymore. We don't have to, beg for work. We should be more selective around the type of client that we want to work with, so that we work with the right clients. And that's something that we've been working really hard at, especially on certain things, because I think as an agency owner, the worst sin is leaving money on the table. I think I don't think maybe in any business, but I think in agencies specifically, you never want to say no. But in order to maintain your integrity as well as your ability to deliver, you have to know when to say no, which is a skill in itself.
100%. Okay, so that gives me a lot of clarity, and yeah, it just goes to show how you stand out. So how I would summarize it now. No marketing expert here, but WowW being not only an award-winning agency, they're absolute specialists in WordPress, and it's obvious to see what it is that they do, and they do it best because they're constantly on top of search rankings, even in new search interfaces like generative AI. So by walking the talk and doing what it is that you do, you're able to stand up by showing that you are the best in WordPress and you're helping people get to the top of search rankings if that's their goal. If not, simply showing success in getting people to know about your business online. And that goes back to your full one-liner value prop of start, grow, and thrive in the digital space.
Yeah.
Or online. So you've got a good sense of your business now, and we've spoken around not being everything to everyone. One thing I'm still not really grasping, and we kind of spoke about this offline, but the fact that Ogilvy is your client, right? And Ogilvy is one of the best known marketing agencies in South Africa. So where I think you stand out really well is being able to do what you do very well for yourself. One thing I'm kind of confused by, and this is no shade on them, I'm just genuinely curious to know why a larger agency would use a smaller agency to help them with whatever it is that you help them with.
Right. So Ogilvy is an interesting client of ours. Full transparency, we worked with them quite a few years ago, but we still brandish that client flag. But how that works is that the nature of marketing and agencies in general is that it's just agencies all the way down, which was referring to, it's always turtles, always the way down, where it's like there's always a bigger turtle on top of another turtle. And agencies, because they never like to leave money on the table, what they will always, not always, but will more often than not do is take on a project and then figure out how to do it afterwards. And what will happen then is most likely external resources will be brought in, and that is often another agency. So the agency like Ogilvy, what they're good at is not actually that they're good at doing like WordPress web design or SEO. Their specialization is that they're good at finding the right other agencies and then putting an entire campaign together. And so what they would do is they would go, okay, cool. We have this huge marketing campaign, because their budgets are also much larger, right? Because they're dealing with corporates. They're not going to work with, your guy down the road who wants to start up something small. You need a non-trivial budget for an agency like Ogilvy. And what they'll do then is find all the right specialists and bring them together. So in our case, we were the web design specialists for a project. I can't say which client, but we built the website component, and then another agency handled the branding component, and then another agency would handle the outdoor advertising and all the other components. And what Ogilvy does is they just kind of project manage that entire campaign.
Okay, so you weren't exactly a direct client of Ogilvy in the sense of the fact that you helped them with their digital marketing. It's the fact that you worked with them on projects for their clients as the specialist provider.
Yeah, so we're a supplier to Ogilvy. So
there we
lot
go.
of
Cool.
our
that
clients,
makes more sense.
A lot of our clients are agencies. So agencies will come to us and they'll say, we need this website built, and can you do it? Can you, give us a quote? And they tender that out to lots of other agencies. And then depending on, who they really want to work with and whoever puts the best price to make it still profitable for them, they'll select. And so Ogilvy would be a client of ours for that. And then the end client, we sometimes will still get the credit for, or we don't get to say. And Ogilvy gets that credit.
Cool. So thank you. Now I really feel like I've tapped out the questions that I have of really understanding the world of agency, but specifically WowW as well. Now I just want to understand the level of scale that you're at, right? Besides being based as in Cape Town, saying you're based in London as well, you're also a remote business. And yeah, just talk to me about the scale that you would describe that you have as the agency that you are.
Right. So team size, that's always, I think, a good metric for an agency to determine where they're at, is at 40. I often mishear 14. No, it's 40. We have a distributed team all around the world. However, majority of the team is based in South Africa. And then we have key team members placed in different parts of the world. So like our head of web design is actually based in London. We have our head of paid marketing who now moved to Portugal. And the only kind of consistent thing between the distribution is that we're all relatively on the same time zone so that we can all work together during the same rough working hours. And so we initially started out as everybody working together in one office. And this was, when we started 2016 all the way up to 2020, where we just signed 3-year lease on our amazing kind of offices in Woodstock. And then COVID hit. And so we made the transition after seeing what it was like during lockdown. We were able, because our systems had been set up in a way that it wasn't difficult for us to switch to working remotely. The only difference was that we weren't able to talk to one another face to face. But through video calls, Slack, and our project management suite, it wasn't a huge operational change because at the end of the day, all of our work was done online. So back to scale, we're at a team of 40. Our revenue for the last financial year was around 25 mil.
Nice. For the first person I've had on the podcast that's openly shared how much money they're making.
Well, I just said revenue, didn't say profit. But,
yeah, sure.
We're doing okay. And
nicely done, man.
And so we're at about 25 mil. And this year we're trying to aim for roughly 30% year-on-year growth. That's our kind of target of what we would like to achieve. Then
That's
in terms,
pretty solid.
Yeah. So what else relates to scale? Probably then the growth of the team. So the team size is also increasing quite quickly with that growth. So I expect us to increase at least by another 10 to 15 people by the end of this year. So roughly like 1 to 2 people a month.
Well, that makes sense. I think also if the nature of the kind of business that you run is that there's relatively linear growth between revenue and the people that you need to employ unless you suddenly start changing your market or price point. So it makes sense.
One of the downsides of an agency is the lack of true scalability in the sense.
Yes. Well, exponential growth. I think scalability is around the fact that it's like, I guess my view on that is maybe not scalability, but I think the point is that can you build a business model and a business that can thrive independently of you as the person that founded it, right? And that you can kind of have the freedom to do what you want with your time. That's it. That's the point. Anything after that and how big and how small is dependent on you as a person, where your skill set is, the kind of business that you've started, and probably a whole bunch of other factors that I'm not going to philosophically get into now. Felix, I'm curious about the international expansion, right? And the fact that you've got a distributed team out in Europe. Talk to me about the client base, right? When was the moment that you were like, okay, cool, we're going to start going for a more international market? Obviously, that's more lucrative and more profitable when we are sitting in South Africa. When did you take the leap to go to an overseas market, and how do you manage that?
Right. So in terms of proportion of client base, we're at the moment 70% South African still, 30% international, but we're actively trying to invert that relationship.
Is that number of clients, Sam?
As a proportion of revenue.
Okay, cool.
So as a proportion of revenue, 30% international and 70% local. And we want to invert that, as you highlighted. We want to geo-arbitrage our talent. So we have a lower cost base here in South Africa where the majority of our talent pool sits. Well, obviously, we do have certain team members in international locations, but the core workforce is in South Africa. And by taking that talent and leveraging the rand to provide a great caliber of service to an international market, we can come in at this point where we're not trying to be cheap. We're trying to offer value. So compared to, I think, other agency models, which will have like their workforce in India or the Philippines, which is the most common places for outsourcing, digital marketing talent to a Western market. We want to come in at this concept of we're on the right time zone, which is a huge plus compared to India and the Philippines. So for the UK, Europe, UAE, we're perfectly positioned for the correct time zone, but then also English as our first language or second language, to the point where it's still primarily people's, they're completely fluent. So we've got English, the price point, and the time zone, and that's our kind of strategic advantage compared to outsourcing to other locations.
Yeah, it's not just around cost that you're competing on at the end of the day. It's about the fact that it's like, yes, we can show it's same value, lower cost, but also all of these other benefits around why you should pick us.
Yeah. So we're not as cheap as not. I actually don't want to use the word cheap. I want to say more cost effective.
Yeah.
Right. We because we're not trying to battle on that type of price. We do want to show value, but we also want to say that like our caliber of work is also far superior. So it's an interesting narrative nuance that we have to direct to ensure that we communicate that value proposition to the right clients.
So I want to go completely left field here, and how do you handle that from a pricing model perspective? Because I mean, a lot of the nature of this business model is going to be time and materials, and so then in terms of how are you going to handle this for a UK market, for example? Are you going to say that this is a minimum price point that we're willing to charge, not because of our profit margins, because maybe even then it's more profitable than what we get locally, but it's more just around the perception that we're creating in this market, and we know what this is worth and what the rates are there. How do you kind of manage your field of negotiability and margin for this international market whilst maintaining that perception you're trying to create? I'd like to pause here for a moment to talk about why it is that we run the Founder Files in the first place, why we've done over 100 episodes, and why we have no intention of stopping anytime soon, and how it is that we go about actually funding this so consistently. And to start off with, the purpose of the Founder Files is to give established entrepreneurs practical stories and insights from people that have been there before, so you can avoid years of trial and error in scaling your own business. And the reason why this is so important to us is it relates very directly to what the purpose of Metavolve is, which is the entity that funds the Founder Files in the first place. And that is to accelerate the time it takes for entrepreneurs to build businesses that are able to thrive without them. Practically, what that looks like is our mission statement, to ensure that as many founders as possible can take a holiday where they actually switch off whilst their business keeps growing. And the reason why this mission is so important to us is because as many entrepreneurs, we built these businesses to potentially work less, right? Have a sense of freedom. But we found ourselves working harder than ever. And we thought when we conquered these original problems around survivability and getting to product market fit, we then achieved growth. And then the nature of the problems that we have now fundamentally changed. And we found ourselves working harder than ever, right? We're working longer hours, we're making harder decisions, people are coming to us, we're having to put out fires, and it can feel so intense, and we're constantly getting pulled back into operations because of the fundamental reason that no one knows our business like we do. And this is where Metavolve comes in. We use strategy as the process to really download all of your knowledge, all your thinking about your business, about your market, about your product into your management team so that they can be empowered to execute while you focus on growth or frankly doing what it is that you want with your time. So if you want to hear more about what Metavolve does and how Metavolve can help you attain a new level of freedom in your scale up, then click on the link in the description below and let's have a chat and a curiosity call to see how I can share some of the insights I've learned from working with and interviewing over 200 business owners in the past 3 and a bit years. But that's it from me for now. Let's get back to the episode.
So we initially thought about charging 2 different rates. So one rate for a local market and a different rate for an international market. That's a challenge when you are transparent with your pricing, which we are at the moment. And it's something that we are uncertain about whether or not we want to change. So some agencies, for example, will charge the client based on the client as opposed to a fixed rate. So for example, they'll know that, okay, this is a corporate client, so they get corporate rates, whereas another company will get different rate card. And that's then done at the discretion of the salesperson. However, because our pricing is relatively transparent, what we've done is we've set price points for the US, the UK, the EU, that is kind of roughly 10 to 20% higher than South Africa. And then, but it works out roughly to the same because we just then don't levy VAT, which is what a South African company would unfortunately have to pay.
Sure. There's also the other benefit of going overseas is that there's also a tax benefit too.
Yeah, no, it's very nice to not have to levy VAT to a client as well.
On a personal experience share, when discussing this, is that the challenge that we have with Metavolve is that our prices are fixed, right? The only reason why we're not transparent about it is because, we've had a client place across 17 countries. South Korea was the most challenging one. We needed a translator. But it's a similar thing with you. It's plus minus 2 to 3 hour time zone. We can work seamlessly without really being affected operationally. But the challenge though is that the nature of the work that we do, high value, high ticket item, high stakes, high trust. And so it needs to be reassuringly expensive. And the thing is, the price point for reassuringly expensive for a strategy advisor in South Africa, where there isn't really much of a market of strategy advisors for entrepreneurs, versus something in the UK, those are very like they're 2 to 3 to 4x different prices in terms of that point. And so we're still exploring that market as we're having it. But the nature of this is it's got to be, the problem is if we end up being too cheap, then it's immediately questioning the value, even though it's that it's just, this is the price point of what it is in this market.
It's a question that we grapple with all the time, is how do we want to charge? Because there's so many paths to success, and it's also very scary to change. We've been wanting to charge more value-based pricing as opposed to hourly-based pricing for ages. And the compromise that we have on this now is that we have value-based products. And then we have, a product-based thing would be something like the creation of a corporate identity. So instead of it being pegged to how much time are we spending, it's based on the deliverables.
There's a clear outcome. There's a clear set of deliverables that you need to meet that's relatively standard. It's the kind of scope of that needs to be defined.
Yeah. Obviously, with value-based pricing, though, then you need to be a little bit more careful about how you manage limits. So let's say something like a brand identity, we manage that with quantity of revisions. So to stop a client having revision 2001.final, we cap a certain quantity of revisions, and that we can then do a product-based thing, or they can go at an ad hoc hourly rate, which is another route. So we give flexibility to what the client needs at the time. But at the end of the day, like charging value versus time, it is something that we struggle with, because we always want to work towards value-based pricing, because then similar to scalability, right? Time, you cannot scale your time unless you just hire more people. But if you want to pay those people better, the only thing that you can do is just charge more per hour. But ultimately, what you want to be able to do is charge value-based pricing, and then you can compensate your team really nicely in addition to good profit margins. Otherwise, there's always kind of a limit that is pegged to that time.
Yeah, it's the simple point of, as Mike Scott says, it's a service-based business, very easy to start, very difficult to scale. Right? Versus a product-based business, it's very difficult to start, very easy to scale, theoretically speaking. So Felix, I want to come back to the geographic expansion, obviously expanding into London. I just want to wrap my head around this. Was this driven by a desire that we're going to go expand this market deliberately, and so we need a team to be present on the ground there? Was this more of a view of we're looking into these markets and we're going to hire people there? Like, how did this happen? Or did people decide to move and then we might as well utilize it? Like, what triggered this moment of deciding to work overseas?
There was an intentional and strategic decision to target the UK more. And then serendipitously,
That is a word. I would know. That's my tattoo.
that's very cool. Our head of web design, Sam, who is an absolute legend, he moved to the UK, and we made the decision that we would match whatever type of relevant UK salary he could have gotten there to retain him. And because we felt that he was just the fundamental right fit. He's excellent at what he does, and perfect culture alignment. He's just the right person for the job. And so keeping him as part of the team and then doubling with his physical location, he has that man on the ground impact. And there is a value to that. Sometimes meeting with key clients and having that credibility. Also, for example, if we wanted to set up a localized, sub company in the UK for, billing efficiency or tax efficiency of some kind, having that physical presence helps. So it was strategic, and then timing just happened with Sam wanting to move. And then now, as other team members have started to also, travel and move to different places around the world, we now have different people in different locations. So again, as long as they're on the right time zone, our team are able to move wherever they want. When I say on the same time zone, a couple hours here and there. And so it just wouldn't work if somebody moved to, say, like East Coast on the States. That's just unmanageable. It's just complete opposite. So so that's the long and the short of it. So that it was strategic in that we wanted to target that, but then when the people did move, we retained them. We just haven't hired strategically from foreign countries yet. We haven't said no to it, but we do want to try and geo-arbitrage our talent, so keeping the majority of the workforce local. Because the downside of hiring overseas is that then the salary expectations are significantly higher.
Yeah, 100%. That is definitely the challenge overseas. Talk to me about the kind of compensation of those international employees. I think obviously upping their salary rates, and obviously what you can charge out specifically for the fact that you are very transparent with your pricing, maintaining it quite close to what your South African pricing is. There's obviously other ways that you can get around trying to compensate them and getting them to earn the high end of what market related would be there. Do you help them out with commission? How does that work?
So we have and that's why I'm very glad to have a business partner who is a management accountant, because I do not want to be working out and doing all these calculations. But we have a very complex remuneration model. But at the end of the day, it boils down to, we want to ensure that our team members are being compensated fairly for the value that they're generating. So in the old days, what we used to do is and which worked fantastically for growing an agency, was we paid our team members 50% of what they generated. And that was incredible, because if we were low on work, an agency's core costs are always going to be people. So people is your product. So when the salaries adjusted to how much work was being done, that meant that if we were thriving, the team were thriving. If there wasn't a lot of work, we were not going to panic that we had this huge, monthly salary payroll that we needed to hit. So that was fantastic for the early days. But what we saw is that for the team, that lack of stable income every month was quite stressful. So because they always had to there's a pressure to constantly perform. We also realized financially, though, on a margin perspective, if we have a 50% compensation model, so if you brought in 100K of revenue, you got paid 50K. That was your salary. But the challenge to that from the business perspective was that we could never then have margins greater than 50%, which sucks when you want to scale and you want to start investing in other things like marketing. Just you have less flexibility, so you're always capped at that 50% mark.
It just makes me realize that it's very easy from a gross profit perspective because you know what that is all the time. But to your point, it's time now that you start getting into the scaling journey, which requires a lot more strategic investments. And besides that, you also want to invest in other things that are just beneficial to the culture. It's like you just feel that chipping away at your net profit instead of something that can eventually feed back into it.
Exactly. And so what we did is we, from when I say we, my business partner, Gon, and I, we made the strategic decision to take a financial hit. So we would bump everybody up to a really solid base salary that then became their monthly salary that wasn't pegged to their revenue generation. And we now have roughly a 40%. So they have to they get compensated on average more closely to 40% of their revenue generation.
But it's a bit more variable now.
It's a bit, so it's not variable. It's stable for them, but we then readjust their salaries every 6 months. So, and if there was a shortfall, for example, if they were overperforming, we then will pay them out a bonus to backdate that generation that revenue generation that they were creating. But the plus side for them was the stability, because and this all happened for multiple reasons, apart from the GP component, the gross profit component. But probably my biggest failure in managing the company was not strategically planning for revenue, so like planning for those lulls. So Christmas, for example, where everybody goes on holiday and there's nobody, doing work. So December and January, and then everybody's revenue was really low for that month.
That's when you want it to be the highest as well. It's because now you're spending money on holiday.
Yeah. So we naively thought that everybody managed their finances the way that we do as entrepreneurs, right? Where we know our income is variable, and so we kind of spread it out for those quieter times. But the team weren't doing that as well as we'd thought they were. And so Christmas was stressful. So we paid everybody else a nice bonus, but it came at a huge, basically it was like me and my business partner, we just out of our pockets for the team. So we just made a big loss that Christmas. Only time we've ever made a loss. So
well then, I think it's a benefit of having that business models and compensation model to begin with.
Yeah. And so that thing taught us two things. One, we needed to change the model. We needed to give people stability. It also kind of removed a lot of the variance, so people could take holidays and things without having to worry about how it would impact their revenue that month. But then from the business perspective, we were able to increase our gross profits. And then, so we took an initial financial knock because it took time for people to catch up, because we focused on efficiency and how to make sure that they could earn that billable amount to validate their new higher salaries. And then from our perspective, we've also then been more strategic about making sure that we're thinking about December 4 or 5 months before. So we're lining up work long in advance so that we never end up with those lulls. And that's just something that you figure out as you grow an agency. It's capacity planning and revenue forecasting, which are things that you don't do in the early days because you're just hustling and trying to get work. But as you grow and as your payroll increases, you have to ensure that you have those strategic predictions early on, because otherwise that's the killer of agencies. I think every agency that I've observed that has failed is because their team grows too large. They don't have the revenue to sustain that team, and then it's like a hungry lion. You just need to keep feeding the beast, and the agencies inevitably kind of consume themselves, where the salaries become too much to manage.
100%. And it's also, you get into this, any service-based business get this feast and famine problem. And especially if you're still on a smaller stage where you as the founder are stuck in operations, you're limiting your ability to sell very much. So Felix, I mean, like if you mentioned this ratio around, it's coming 50% referrals, 50% search, which is absolutely incredible. But what I want to know now is how you've gotten your own sales engine right, and to be able to get to a position where you have the earned luxury of being able to choose the clients that you want to work with. You're able to say no now. But obviously, it's one of those critical moments where when celebrate the success, but obviously one mustn't get complacent now. So how is it that you're managing that sales engine? How did you get it to the point where it's able to sustain the business so well?
Right. So 50% search, 50% referrals. That's kind of the loose, high buckets, but those will kind of get siloed into deeper kind of sub buckets. So within search, you'll have organic search versus paid search. Within referrals, you'll have like partnerships and existing clients. So there are kind of sub buckets within that. But the way that we scaled was to actually ensure that there was dedicated people whose roles were to sell. And so that revolved creating an actual sales process, having a proper CRM. So we use an amazing sales coach, Outsell Sales, or Richard Walton. And when I realized that sales needed to be something that we needed to have on lock, that we needed to ensure that it was predictable and scalable, he coached me through that to build a sales team. So that's what we've been focusing on the last 2.5 years. And so we actually recently acquired another agency to bring in additional resources, but primarily the founder of that agency, because what we sell is complex, and the complexity of it requires a type of salesperson who is actually almost an entrepreneur themselves.
Are you also selling to entrepreneurs?
We're selling to entrepreneurs, but we also need to be able to therefore put ourselves immediately within 15 minutes of a conversation, we have to be able to kind of at a high level fully understand how their business works, what are the driving forces for that, and then put together a solution to solve a problem that they have in some kind of marketing channel. And for me, I believe that the only real person that can solve that quickly is another founder type.
Why?
Because of the complexity of it, in my opinion, it requires another founder type person or another person who's run a business, who really understands all the nuances. Maybe one day I'll hopefully solve, and I can build out a complete sales team to replace myself. But I've found that the best type of person is a founder type individual who can see all of those things very quickly and then present a solution. It's also about how you talk, and we've actually discussed this, where I said there's an unspoken, non-relationship, but like a camaraderie between other entrepreneurs where you just get it. You know what they've been through, you understand their pain points, and you have a level of respect for one another that non-business owners don't get. It's like an exclusive club. We just know, and especially if you've been through the different stages of growing a business, you can immediately relate to their certain pain points.
Trauma bonding.
Trauma bonding would be a great way of describing that. So when I was looking for people and to build a team, it just made sense to me that hiring another founder type person to take on like a head of business development role was another founder. And so that's what we did. We acquired another agency last year, and that founder there, John T, is now taken on our head of business development. So building out a sales team and a process. So it's having a sales process and then measuring the data on that. The data is so important. So we have a really great CRM setup. And from that data, the insights that we can derive enable us to make very strategic and informed decisions, which are very, we're no longer acting blind. We know where the money's coming from and how to then target it. And that can inform our strategies and what we do next.
Can you give me an example of what that looks like?
Yeah. So let's just say, for example, and this is a discussion we had last week, right? Which was, we have a pitching process and we have a number of inquiries that come through. And so in order to work out how many inquiries we roughly want to have or handle in a month, to generate the revenue we want to target. So I said earlier, we were on 25 mil and we want to increase by 30% this year. In order to do that, because we now have the historical data, we know what our rough conversion rate is. So we know that for every phone call or email consultation that we have or inquiry that comes in, we know that on average, 1 in 3 of those clients will convert to a project. So we've got a 33% conversion rate for every.
That's high. That's very high.
We try because we qualify our clients as well. We don't just.
Sure.
We also we weed out a lot of riffraff.
So 1 in 3 from first meeting, right? From first meeting becomes a paid for engagement.
Yeah. Well, no, from first meeting, from 33% from initial inquiry. So
wow.
Filling out
that's
a form,
that is really high.
Yeah. It gets higher from a meeting. I'd
hope so.
We have that data, right?
Yeah.
And we know how often we need to follow up with emails. We know how many meetings it'll take. We know the average duration of like how long it takes to convert a client. So it roughly takes us about a month of negotiations and things. So it's not we can't just get a ton of clients tomorrow. We know that we have at least a month rolling period. And so this data that we have now, because we've been tracking that so accurately for the last 2 years, enables us to make informed decisions on how we're going to reach our new target. And that was that's different to how we were working when we started out, which was, inquiries came in, let's handle them and see what happens. And hopefully we hit our targets. Well, not targets, we didn't have targets. We just got projects, did the work, and then measured it retroactively. Now we're trying to forecast and see what the revenue will be and whether or not that is on track to hit our target, because we've set a target, which is just a more strategic way of working compared to what we did historically.
But I think the point is like you've been measuring this for long enough that you've got the data that can now be predicted, right? Because you've got a good enough sample size that it can actually be generalized off of.
Exactly.
So talk to me through that sales process. What I want to know is the fact that you, at the point if you get an inquiry in, and 1 in 3 is going to be converted. I think that's way higher than what I've heard generally people being able to convert, because that for you is a qualified lead kind of coming into your sales process, and then once it's a qualified lead, 1 in 3, that's super high. What did you like really learn and get right in your sales process to be able to make that conversion work? I guess maybe for me to ask you a question another way, how did you get it from like 1 in 10 or whatever it might have been, and cut that down to the point that it's now 1 in 3?
The process of that sales journey was the thing that changed the most was really selling the vision, not just a product. So what I used to do when somebody would come to us, I used to think that it was always based on price. It was like, what's the cheapest price that I can put together to build a website that they will say yes to? And what we realized was, or not that we realized, what we found was a far more impactful way, and also got a much bigger ticket at the end of the day, was, this is the problem you want to solve. This is the optimal solution to solve that problem. Or if you want to get here, this is the path to that, not what you can afford right now. And that narrative shift and that change in thinking was very impactful in the way that our projects then converted, but also on the success of what we were selling. So instead of saying, so client comes along, they go, we want a website. And I go, okay, here's your website. This is how much a website costs. I start with, why do you want a website? What are the problems that you're trying to solve? Oh, okay, you're trying to increase your revenue to this thing. You want to build an online store, and you want to hit a target of, like 1 million in sales a month. Okay, well, to get there, first thing, we need to start with your brand, because you don't have a brand. If we just go build a website for you now, it's going to be hard to design that website, because we don't know who your brand is. We don't know what you're selling. Maybe you have a cool product, but we need a bit more than that to market that effectively. So let's start with your branding. Then we scope out what you need from just the functional standpoint to build a nice e-commerce website. And then you go, okay, cool. Now you've got your website, but how do you get your customers? Okay, well, you need to pair that now with some kind of traffic acquisition strategy, whether that be paid ads or SEO or social media marketing, whatever it's going to be, you need that. And we now position that entire journey, that start, grow, thrive model from the beginning, which also then ensures that our ticket size is bigger. It also ensures that the client knows what they're in for, and they also have a vision to buy into. They can see the whole journey from the initial proposal rather than just line item website, which is a far improved sales process.
Right.
And that change of that messaging and that narrative is what skyrocketed the conversion rate and the project value, because we're selling a journey, not a product.
Well, you're being that trusted partner to begin with, and it's that first piece of trust that you build around, like, okay, like, you know what we do, otherwise you wouldn't have put an inquiry in, right? Like, where do you want to get to? Like, let's actually just have a conversation, whether it's us or not. Like, please be us, but like, whether it's us or not, what is it that you're trying to achieve? What do you need in order to get there? It's like, listen, we need a bit of a reality check quickly, because it's like, it's actually, in order to achieve that, you need a lot more, but this is also why. Right. And it's like, okay, cool. And let's break it down in terms of what we can realistically start with.
Yeah. Also, the big thing is selling the right. So also we can tell the client whether or not they're going to succeed, whether or not they are willing to invest the right resources. So sometimes a client will come along and they want to achieve a whole bunch of deliverables. And we say, okay, cool. If you want to achieve those deliverables, to do that properly, we need to charge this. Whereas what we used to do is adjust our pricing to just win the project. We negotiate, but now we just don't compromise. We say, if you want to do this properly, here's what we need to do. And that ensures that they succeed as well. Otherwise, what could have happened was we take on the project, we don't have enough budget to deliver on their vision or their goals, and then everyone's kind of unhappy at the end of the day.
So talk to me through that first call. I mean, what also stood out for me is that you need in the first 10 to 15 minutes, you need to identify the problem, but also present the solution at the same time. I think part of that is requiring is like, you've done this many times, but also you're very clear on what your solution is and what problems it can really solve.
We can solve. Yeah.
Yeah. But like, what are some of the questions that you've learned through experience, and also working with Richard Walton, was his name?
Yeah, Richard Walton.
Yeah. So working with Richard Walton and then going through your own experience, what are these questions that you've learned? Because I found also in sales, it's not about the answers, it's the questions that actually progress people through it the fastest. What are the questions that have worked most effectively for you in those early stages?
Yeah. So starting with why, trying to figure out like what is it that you're wanting to do.
As soon as you said that, sorry, now I'm looking at your bookshelf behind you.
I've got my Simon Sinek
book.
there. Yeah, he's there. He's hiding, I think.
Yes, it's there. It's third from the top on the left.
Yeah. So we've also done this, as you said, we've done this enough that we also know what are all the questions that we need to ask. So we actually send out like a pre-scoping script of all the questions that might be relevant, and we send it before we have our meeting, that they can kind of browse through of like, this is the kind of stuff that we would probably like to know. And then we just have a conversation. And I've gotten to the point where I know the questions and I know how to ask them in a way that doesn't feel like a questionnaire. So it's not, okay, what is this? What is this? What is this? I go, okay, cool. So tell me about your business. And then they start explaining. And I say, okay, cool. What do you want to achieve? Okay, cool. Oh, so how have you been doing this before? And then I've got my AI note taker taking all the kind of the recordings. So I can be really present in the meeting rather than sitting there kind of taking notes the whole time. And then afterwards, I have all of these kind of data points, and then I know our process, and I can take what they want to achieve and whether that aligns with what we're able to do. And then I craft a unique proposal that, and a kind of a vision of how to get there with what we provide. And then I also say very clearly, like, this is what we don't do. This is to manage expectations. So a client last week was like, how do you do all of the photography for the thing? And then I go, okay, cool. Well, we are not photographers. We have access to stock libraries and things, but if you need real life photography, we have a great photographer that we can refer you to, but we don't do the photography. That would be something that you would need to provide us with. So it's also about managing their expectations throughout the whole journey as well. And it's just as much as saying what we do and what we don't do to the clients, because they don't know. They have no idea what is included and what is not. And so we've had to be very exhaustive over the years of documenting what exactly is included and what is not, to mitigate that expectation that might not be realistic.
Yeah. So I like what you've suggested around the script as well. Like, so the point is, it's like, how can someone feel prepared for this, because they're still committing their time to something, and what do I expect? For us, what we've done now is that we've simply sent a document through. It's like, this is the best case scenario, the worst case scenario, and within that, it manages the expectations of what this is likely going to go and where the conversation that's going to happen as well. We'll let you know as that accumulates more data and as we continue to improve that. So you've got your scalable process. right? You've tweaked your business model, and it's made me think of just a typical principle of, what got you here isn't going to get you there, right? And so you're in a position now where clearly what you're doing is working, right? You've got enough sales and leads that you can control who you say yes to. You are expanding into an international market, and you've already got a 70-30 percentage share there as you're trying to obviously improve that proportion and therefore improve the profitability as well. Even before we climbed on this call, you've got enough freedom within your own time that you could take a bit of a half day and dedicate your time and attention to this podcast, but also catching up with things. So you've got like a whole bunch of indications of you at this real sweet spot, right? You're at this very excellent point, at least as a founder, in terms of the fact that you've got a good level of clarity, control in your business. Talk to me about what's been helping you with that. How have you been handling this journey to give you that feeling and that state that you're in?
What we've found over the last couple of years that has empowered and enabled a lot of that success has been the approach that we've taken to working. And that's been following a more structured component as opposed to feeling our way and organically growing. So when we started, it was all intuition based, and it was, do whatever needs to get done and figure it out as you go. Now, so a couple of years ago, my business partner joined what is called EO, or Entrepreneurs Organization, and actually, to be more specific, EOA, Entrepreneurs Organization Accelerator, because there's different thresholds. And through that organization, there's a lot of training and things, but there was the founder of that organization had written a great book for how to grow and scale a business. It was called Scaling Up. And my business partner was like, I think we should really try and incorporate this and apply this to our business. So we did. And that has a scaling process broken up into different stages, which is people,
strategy, execution, cash.
Strategy, people, execution, cash. Yeah. It's been a while since we've read that one. And then more recently, in the last 2 years, we've pivoted from that to I would say a slightly more modernized version of that. They're very similar. They cover roughly the same principles, just the execution of it is different. But we pivoted to, I've got the here in front, Traction.
I try to listen to it as an audiobook. Don't recommend. Get the book.
It's a visual book, actually. There's a lot of like diagrams and things, and an audiobook won't do it justice. But the framework that we had taken from this book and implemented that framework into our business, it's called the EOS framework, Entrepreneurial Operating System. We've taken that framework, and that has given us the tools and the mechanisms to put a lot of what we were feeling and thinking and kind of intuiting and making that more structured, which has made it more efficient and more purposeful. So a good example would be like one of the first things is like positioning and vision. And as a founder, I think it's very easy to it's all in here. It's all in this noggin, and an incredibly important aspect of the founder is to communicate that to everyone else. And so you often lose your way that it's all in here, but you need to get it out there. And so this gives you like, it takes you through that process of like how to formalize it, how to get it out there, and then how to communicate it with the world, but also more importantly, your team, and then getting their buy-in so that the team is all aligned with where you're going. Because as you scale, when things happen quickly and people join, and you very quickly lose your ability to have a deep relationship with each person, and you get busy, and the vision of where you were going might get lost. And if you don't have a mechanism to ensure that there's that alignment, people might go off in slightly different directions. And if people are doing that, the core purpose of the business loses its way, and it's quite hard to bring it back. So it helps with like that one of those components. Then it talks, guides you through how to hire the right people, which is super important when scaling a business. It's getting the right people and the right culture and building that culture and fostering that culture. Talks about things like your like problem solving, how to deal with actual problems, how to structure the organization so that you have an ideal leadership structure to ensure that there's accountability and action on things that need to get done. So it's just, at the end of the day, it gives you these tools, and that's something that you can obviously build yourself. And we don't take this as, it's not the Bible, right? We don't follow it religiously. It's a tool that we apply, and we mold it to be more accurate to our business, but it still gave us it's like following a recipe. It's like trying to bake a cake and you don't know how to bake a cake. You don't have a recipe for how to bake a cake. Yeah, you can maybe wing
trial
it.
and error cake is it's not going to end well.
Yeah, baking is a science, and there's a lot of conventional wisdom that I think a lot of businesses go through. And it's just, I think, condensed a lot of that conventional wisdom into a structure that will help a growing business get where they want to a lot faster than if they just tried to do it themselves. And that structure and that purposefulness has been really instrumental into just so many important aspects of the business and our lives.
Yeah, 100%. I think following a framework, it's one thing that still bothers me, and it's a big reason why I have the podcast, is that it's 2025, right? Why is there still so much trial and error in growing a business? We've had businesses around for thousands of years, right? I think we're in the fourth industrial revolution now, and the nature of business models in the world is different, but there's still a lot of wisdom to be built off of, and I'm glad that you are following some of it. Felix, this has been an awesome conversation around everything from your growth to the journey that you've had with Traction, to being overseas, to this business partnership that you've had, right? Talking about your sales function. There's so many insights in here. What I want to know is what's the future hold for you? What are the next steps? I mean, you're quite clear in terms of what you want to be achieving from a revenue perspective in the next year. But I guess for you as Felix and for Woww Digital, what does the future look like?
So for myself personally, I would like to free myself from some of the roles that I've been taking. So I've been leading the kind of sales and marketing aspect of the business, and I want to take a step back from that and focus more on the business itself, and then being in the kind of founder-led sales role that I'm currently fulfilling. So moving from that and moving to a more strategic position. So the way I would describe it is actually acting like a CEO type, not being in the business. Because I never want to call myself, it doesn't feel right to say like a CEO, because that doesn't feel right for what I'm doing. Even though it might be technically on paper, but it doesn't feel like that yet, because I'm still so involved in certain aspects of the business. That's changing. But the core thing for me over the next couple of years is to really fully free myself to be in that pure leadership role than an executional role. So that's, for me personally, what I want to achieve. Then for the business, obviously our international expansion is a core focus, but the reason why we want to expand internationally, not is because we want to expand internationally, it's because we want to improve our billable rates or our way of charging, because we want to improve the lives of our team. At the end of the day, like, what we want to do is like ensure that every person in the team can lead like a really healthy and fulfilling life. We have a core value of pursue happiness. And in order to pursue happiness, monetary stability is vital. So we want to ensure that our team are well catered for. And so core goal of the company is to ensure that we are working with the best clients in the world so that we can provide the best value and in turn also be compensated, which allows us to compensate our team and enable them to thrive. So another core value of thrive together. But yeah, so our international growth and the caliber and quality of clients is our next big thing. And then some experimentation. As an agency, we've specialized in WordPress, but we acknowledge that we don't want to be, we want to adapt to the times. We want to continuously improve. So we're looking at some extra verticals now. So Shopify is on the cards, maybe Webflow, but probably not Webflow. Shopify, though, for sure, I think is an avenue that we want to look into. And then more excitingly, what we want to do is just leverage our agency to maybe become, to build a product or sell something else. So practice, again, what we preach. We want to use the agency to empower other ideas. And so that's the next kind of exciting thing for us, is to build something else.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very exciting chapter in general, and it's all, speaking to a new life cycle stage that you're growing into as a business. And I've got a life cycle guide that we've built out that I'd love to share with you, and so you can see where you are positioned on that journey. But actually love to get your feedback, and that goes for anyone in the audience. It's free, like you can use it and figure out where you're at in terms of your business. What I want to know now is that moving into this point of going from, because I'm curious, because the assumption that I had where the freedom that you want, right? You want to be in the CEO leadership role. Given the states the business is in now, I'd assume that you're in that loss. Obviously, you'd still lost the founder-driven sales. What are the challenges that you're facing in making sure that you can get from here to there?
It's a big question. And I don't really have the full answer, but what I'm currently focusing on is looking at my day-to-day responsibilities and really trying to focus and figure out on whether or not that is something that I should be doing. So documenting like what I do and what this could be done more effectively by someone else. So working out, there's a great calculation for this, is to work out your average billable rate, and then anything that you could hire someone else for more cost effectively, you should. Otherwise, you're basically like losing money. So doing that, but at the moment, the big focus is building the sales team. So and that's where John's here, our new head of business development, and as he takes on the leadership role of running a sales division, that's going to be hugely impactful. And building out that sales team who will be able to then maybe take that founder-led sales and make it a team-led sales, which is the biggest challenge. And then from there, I'll be able to focus more on more strategic decision-making instead of meeting with clients, although I think I'd always like to do that. It's one of the perks. I love to meet new businesses, and it's been extremely rewarding and a huge privilege to get an insight into so many different businesses and learn how they tick. And I don't know if I'd ever want to give that up fully. I think I'm not sure if I want to do that every single day for the next 10 years.
I get what you mean. I think one thing that I'm very excited for is it's also this balance between the role that I want in Metavolve and what it looks like to be in a leadership capacity, but also the ideal that I want is like, I'm not sure if I want a kind of the C-suite level job in a service-based business, right? What I maybe want is to hire someone else who could potentially be, and I obviously can't speak for Brett. If he wants to be MD, go for it. Right? Like he can be the business partner that handles that. But I'd love it if I could essentially replace myself in many ways just to be a strategy facilitator and advisor. Like that's because it's what I absolutely love. Well, I'll cross that bridge when I get there. Felix, it's fun to finish off, right? And thank you once again for sharing your journey, your insights, your wisdom with us. What is the one question that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you that you'd like to answer now?
As a founder, what has been the greatest lever for success, or as a business owner, what has been the greatest lever for success? And I would say that is sharing the load. And what I mean by that is finding the right people or person, in my case, to help you manage that. And so similar to the traction framework, there's another offshoot by the same author called Rocket Fuel. And what Rocket Fuel talks about is that every business needs two founders or two business partners, often titled like the visionary and the integrator. And what I've found and have seen quite consistently now is that the happiest founders and the founders that are achieving the best success are usually those that have those two roles solved. And that's something that I think we've got nailed at the moment with my business partner, Garnet. And so my best piece of advice is go find yourself a Garnet, or in Garnet's case, a Felix. Find your combination that generates that rocket fuel, that recipe. And that is what I think is going to really help any scaling business really thrive, is that. Because when you try and do it yourself, it's much harder, but also it's lonely. And I really value being able to share that load with someone else and with my team in general, right? Having the team and the structure is super important. Having the right leaders in the right seats, it's super valuable. And that's what enables scale, because you can't scale without the right people.
Couldn't agree more. Felix, thank you very much for being on the Founder Files. I will see you pretty soon.
All right. Great. Thank you.
So as I mentioned at the end of the episode there, we do have this free life cycle guide that we are more than happy to share with anyone, just so they can really pinpoint where it is that they're on in their business journey. What are some normal problems that you face, some characteristics at this stage, but also some mindsets that you need to tweak in order to get to the next stage of business. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to allow you to explore it on your own. But even to the problem that Felix is facing, our entire client base is filled with businesses that are in this position where they're predominantly being sucked into ops and really want to take that first step out and being founder-driven sales, where Felix has managed to get to. Or they're in this position of really transitioning into the level of freedom that they want as founders, of being the leaders, being the CEOs, and being these executive directors as well, whilst they scale their business into other countries and into other markets. Those are the two main problems that we solve. So what is the next goal that you want to be achieving, where you want to have this next level of freedom in your business journey, and making sure that you get there? We help you formulate the strategy that's going to get you there, but not only do that, but also download that thinking into your team so you can also empower them to execute. And that's the secret sauce in really being able to free you up. So if you want to figure out how it is that we do that, please reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to share a little bit of our insight in terms of how is it that we help founders achieve more freedom. Or it is a 30-minute curiosity call. And yeah, I hope to chat to you soon. That's it from me for now. Thank you very much for listening to another full episode of the Founder Files. I'll see you next time. Cheers.